Hello everyone, welcome to the day 12. Today we get started with the very first concept of object-oriented principles. Previous session we talked about class and object, so our basic setup is done. Today we will understand that what is abstraction and why it is so important in the world of object-oriented programming. Now since we have understood what a class and object in Java is and all about the constructor, I think we are all set to move into the details of the object-oriented principle. So the very first principle that we're going to talk about is abstraction. This is the very first object-oriented principle that we're going to talk about. Now, as I already mentioned that object-oriented programming is used to solve the real-world problems, the challenges that you face in the real world that has to be solved programmatically. Now, how does the abstraction helps there? Let's say to take the real-world example itself. This word abstraction, now we are using it that we are going to make use of object-oriented programming, is everywhere, sir. Everywhere. Everything that we do in the real world, to some extent we are making use of abstraction. I'll give you an example. Say for example, let's say that when I started learning how to drive a car, right? Driving experience has been very much abstracted out for me. I was told that, hey, this is the steering wheel, and if you go and rotate clockwise, the car will move right, and if you move it anti-clockwise, the car will move left. However, is it that simple? No. Typically, when you go and rotate your steering wheel internally, so many things happens. There is some role of a combustion engine. There will be certain lever, there will be pulleys. They all will interact, and finally the tire moves, right? But all those complications, I don't care. At the runtime, I don't have to worry about that how typically internally all these things are happening. As an end user, I only know how to move my steering wheel and my car will move that way, right? So what I'm trying to do here to make the life of the people who are trying to learn driving easy, we have just abstracted out all the inner details. So abstraction in very simple words means that hiding the unnecessary details. For example, when I'm trying to drive, I don't need to know how internally they have been able to do the mechanical excellence to build this engine who helps me to drive the things. Fair enough? So abstraction in very simple terms means that hiding the unnecessary details. Unimportant details, when you don't go and tell your customer, that typically is called as an abstraction. And when you do abstraction, it gives you certain advantages. What are the advantages of using the abstraction? What will be the advantages? The first advantage that we have already seen. What is the first advantage? Is that it makes the life of the customer easy for your customers. The number two advantage of abstraction, again, that is that it helps in the security and also helps in parallel improvement. Let me explain you one more example which will help you understand abstraction in the greater details. Say for example, if I go and talk about Facebook, I believe all of you should have already used this Facebook as a social media. On a Facebook landing page, from the day it was launched, there are only these things. You have to go and pass your username. You have to go and pass your password. And there is a submit button. There is a similar interface which is there on the Facebook landing page since the time the Facebook has come to the life. But all these years, the way how this whole information is managed, or I can go and say that it's login API. This login API has evolved a lot. Maybe the very first version of the local version 1, let's say that if I go and talk about the version 1, it used to store in the files. Maybe version 2, it was encrypted files. Maybe version 3, it led to the database. You started storing into the database. Then what you do, you started using the encryption. Then the version 5, you did the hashing. The version 6, let's say that you do the distribution. And let's say in the today's modern world, you have something called as multi-factor authentication. So the point that I'm trying to tell here is that all these years, last 10, 12 years, when the Facebook has evolved so many times, it has tried to make itself more secure. For the end user, the interface remains same. It's username, password, submit. So only because these unnecessary details has been abstracted out from the customer, it has been easy for the Facebook to go again and keep on improving, keep on getting better. Just assume that every user, every time you make the changes as being impacted, they might not like to continue on the Facebook, because every time you push a new release, a user has to log in a different way. That's not how anyone would expect things to be. So when you're making use of abstraction here, when you're trying to make use of abstraction here, it allowed Facebook or any other system as such to do things in parallel without impacting your experience of the customers. Right? That's another advantage of using abstraction. That's another advantage of using the abstraction. And also I talked about the security. Why security? The end user only knows, boss, I have to put username, password, submit. He doesn't care, and he doesn't know the information that which database it is getting stored, where it is being stored, how it is being stored, what is the internal algorithm. Since the external user who is just passing information, he is only aware of few things, not all the details. It also helps in making the things secure. There are many other advantages, but the one more thing that I would like to go and mention is that abstraction helps in managing your code, better. And we'll see as we move ahead in this Java lecture that how and why I'm saying that. When you know abstraction, it helps you to manage your code better. So now, since we have understood abstraction is hiding the unnecessary details from your customers, and we know that if you do it, it makes system more secure. It makes in allowing your developers to keep on improving the system without impacting the experience of your customers. It's easy on your customers, and it also helps you to manage your code better. Let's try to see that how in the world of Java we do abstraction. So abstraction in the world of Java is being achieved with the help of two ways. One is called with the help of something called as an abstract classes. And normally we say that abstracts are between 0 to 100% abstract. And then with the help of something called as interfaces. Now again, previously, before Java 8 version, typically interfaces only used to have the abstract methods. So they were called as 100% abstract, but now these days you can have more varieties of default and the static methods as well, which have some concrete method implemented. So let's, instead of talking more on what abstract class and interfaces are, let's try to build these abstract classes with the code example and understand what they are. And again, to tell you people, these are very important concepts just for your basic fundamental knowledge in the Java, and at the same time, these are the hot favorite topic of the interviewers. So keep a close eye on understanding what abstract classes are, what interfaces are, and then try to think of that what will be the differences. So let's first take each of these things in detail with the help of code, and then we'll understand that how abstract classes are different from interfaces. So let me go and open my Eclipse. And now it's time that I should go and create another I should go and create a package inside this, and let me go and call it as com.aimers dot, and let me go and call as oops. Fair enough. Let me go and close all this. So very first thing that we need to do is that we need to go and create something called as an abstract class. We're going to create something called as an abstract. Let me name this something. For example, let me go and call it as a demo of abstract. Okay. Now, before we go and talk about, let's set the rules right. That which type of a class will be called as an abstract class. So, for a class to be abstract, it should follow two things. At least first thing is that at least one method should be abstract. That's number one. And number two, that class should be prefixed with abstract. So these are the two key things that you need to take care of when you're defining a class as an abstract class. These are two key things that you have to take care of when you want to create a class as an abstract class. So for example, in this demo extract, if I go and create a method called as, let's say for example, public void method 1. Now as soon as you go and write anything inside this, right, I go and say that hello world. When you go and write anything inside a method, right, if you have this curly bracket and you have this closing curly bracket, these type of methods are called as a concrete methods. Then what are the abstract methods? Abstract methods are the one which only have the definition. You don't write any kind of code that what goes inside this. In a nutshell, abstract method will not have any kind of method body. So let's see what could be the example of that. So I can say that public void method 2, and I go and enter it. Now here I don't have any method body, right? But this has started giving me the error. Let's try to see that what that error is. So if I go and click on this, it is saying change to abstract. It is giving me certain suggestions, right? So I can go and click on this, and what it has done is it has added a keyword called as a, so let me go and delete this. If you see here, it has went ahead and added a keyword called as an abstract. So abstract is another keyword in Java. As we mentioned, keyword is something which you cannot use in naming a variable. So this is a keyword which means that this method is an abstract method. This method is an example of an abstract method. Fair enough? Cool. And as soon as you do this, right, this class also has got a prefix of abstract class. If I go and try to remove this, right, if I go and try to remove this definition, right, it will throw me error. So if you have any single method which is abstract, you also have to prefix your class with the abstract. Fair enough. So the few key points about the abstract method that we have already seen. The first point is that the class has to be prefixed with abstract keyword. That's number 1. The number 2 is that at least one abstract method. That's number 2. And number 3, since it is an abstract class, so it is always meant to be inherited. So the third point is, and we'll talk more about this in the later on, third important part of this abstract class is that it can't be initialized or instanced, or in simple words, I cannot make the object out of it. Why? Let's try to see that. So let me go and create something called as, right, let me go and define a class called as test. Sorry, I have to go and define a class called as test, and then I have something called as a public static void main string args, and then what I do is let me try to go and create the object of this. So I go and say that this obj equals to new demo abstract. So we're going to try to create an object out of it. It is throwing me an error. As you can see here, it is throwing me an error. Why it is throwing me an error? Because demo abstract can't instantiate an abstract class. I can go and instantiate in an abstract class. So this is the first way through which you can go and achieve abstraction in the world of Java, making use of the abstract classes. Fair enough. What is the other way in which you can go and create the abstraction in Java? The other available ways which is available in Java is with the help of something called as the interfaces, right? So one of the way was abstract classes, other one is called the interfaces. Let's say to see how we can go and create an interface. So let me go and create something called a Java class, and let me go and give it a name called as the interface demo. Now the only difference here is the interface doesn't start with the keyword called as the class. I'll go and call it as interface. Okay, so this is the first difference. As you go and define an interface, it has to be prefixed to the keyword called as an interface. Perfectly fine. Now I can also go and let me go and make it a better suitable name. Let me go and call it as animal interface. Let's assume that animal interface. Now as soon as I change this, the name of the file is interface demo.java and name of the interface is animal. It is giving me the error, right? So what I need to, let me go and check what has to be done. Let me go and click on this. There will be multiple options. Rename the file to. So I'll go and rename the file. So now what happened? The file also got renamed. So interface also follows the same rule. The name of the interface should be named with the name of the file, which is animal.java. Now, when I go and talk about interface typically have following types of methods. With the latest version of the Java, interface will have the following type of the method. It will have the abstract methods. It will have the default methods and also the static methods. Now both these default and static methods have a concrete implementation, Now let's try to write the code to understand this. So in this case, I can go and say that I can have an abstract method. So I will go and say that abstract and the abstract method is void make sound. No implementation here, right? So the void make sound. Then I have something called as default method, default void sleep. So in the default method, I can actually go and write some code. So it will have the concrete implementation says out, and I can say that I am sleeping. And then we have something called as default. Well, no, this was the default method. I have another method called as static void eat says out, and I'll go and say that I am eating. So as you can see here, in the case of the interface, I have an abstract method, which is abstract, no implementation. Then I have a default method, and I have a static method. Now, one of the questions that might be coming to you, that both default and static has the implementation, and so these are the concrete methods. What is the difference between these two? So normally, the static methods, as the word static itself indicates, these belongs to interfaces. So anyone who wants to go and call this method, they don't need to have a concrete implementation of the interface. In other words, they don't need to have the child class. Now this parent-child relationship we go and talk about in the concept called as inheritance some while from now. But for understand that, for making use of this method eat, I can directly go and call animal.eat. Let's try to see that. If I have to go and call this animal.eat, I can simply go and say that sys out, and I can go and say that animal.eat, right? And if I go and run this, let's try to see what. Now this is giving me error. Why? Because animal.eat itself does not return anything, right? So I can go and call system.out.println. That's perfectly fine. I can simply go and say that animal.eat. Now why it is giving the error? Let's try to go and see that. Now animal, I have this method called as. So after saving this file, I see that it's working all fine. Now if I go and click on run as and run on the Java application, I see that I'm printing, I'm eating. Right, so what we understand from here is that interface has a method called as a default. This default belongs to the child objects. Now, what are the child objects? How they are created, we'll see in a while. When we make progress, we'll talk about the concept called as inheritance, and we're going to talk about the parent-child relations, then we're going to talk about the child objects. But this one is static, this belongs to the interface, belongs to interface itself. So whatever the interface is, using the interface name itself, you'll go and call it. This was added. Why? Because again, when you have an interface, there will be a parent-child relation. Don't get bogged down by the concept called as parent-child relationship. We'll talk in details in some while now, right now. But it helps to add multiple functionalities. Once we are done with our inheritance concept, we'll again come back and say that what was the advantage of bringing this static method and the default methods in the world of interface. Previously, in the earlier versions of the Java, it only used to have the abstract methods, and that's why they used to be called as 100% abstraction. So now, since we have understood abstraction, I'll again quickly summarize. Abstraction is hiding the unimportant details from your customers. For a better experience of the customers, for the better security, it allows your team to keep on making changes without impacting the experience of the customers who are using your products, right? And it also helps in the security. And the best part of it that once you make use of abstraction, typically it helps you to manage your code well. Going ahead, I will always say that always code for interface. Remember this phrase. Why I'm saying this will get clear as we make more progress in the Java itself. So now, since we have understood abstraction, the next important concept here is called as encapsulation. But before we go even there, let's talk about one thing, which is the interviewer favorites. Normally, you will go and find that in the interview, people will ask you the question that what is the difference between an abstract class and an interface. What are the differences? What are the main difference between the abstract class and the interfaces? The first difference between abstract class and interface, and I want you people to seriously watch this because this could be one of the very commonly asked questions in your interviews. Abstract class has an instance variable. On the other hand, the interfaces can have only one type of variable, which is static and final. Now, what is the difference? Instance variable means that these variables will be of the child object or instance. On the other hand, the static and the final that you see here, this belongs to interface set. That's number one. The number two is that they have both. What kind of method do they have? The type of the method that they have is both concrete and abstract methods, right? And when I go and talk about the concrete methods, it means that it will have a methods both static as well as belonging to the objects. When I go and talk about the interface, they have three types of the methods. One is called as an abstract method, but you don't have to use explicitly the keyword called as abstract. You also have a default method that has started coming with the latest versions of Java, and also something called as a static method. We've already seen them. Now, number three is that the main difference is that in the case of a child class can only extend one abstract class. Now, what does extending means? We'll talk about that in the inheritance, but just for now, understand that if there's a parent-child relationship, there's any child class, it can have only one parent abstract class. Only one. It can have only one. On the other hand, a child class can have multiple parent interfaces. The child class can have multiple parent interfaces. We're going to see that in action with an example when we go and talk about when do we do it? When do we go and talk about the inheritance sometime from now. Finally, day 12 is also done. Very smartly and quickly we have understood what abstraction is, how it is implemented in the world of Java using abstract classes and interfaces. I hope you are having good time. As I always say, please let me know in comments that how you're liking this video. Every comment that you write, I go and read it. Your love means a lot to me. Please share with your friends so that we make this as one of the most vibrant community for the tech enthusiasts. Thank you for watching me.